Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Ever had that one relative who thinks the world owes him everything? Well, meet my Aunt Carol. You see, I'm what you call a digital nomad. Hopping from country to country, working from my laptop. Aunt Carol, on the other hand, always fancied herself as a family matriarch, minus the responsibility and plus all the entitlement. This story was when I landed a sweet gig in Thailand. Beautiful beaches, friendly locals, and my favorite spicy street food. I informed my family excited about this new adventure. Everyone was thrilled except Aunt Carol, who just asked, "So who's watching your house and your stuff?" Her eyes glittered a bit too much at the word stuff. Fast forward 3 months, life was a dream. Then one day I got a frantic call from my neighbor, Mr. Jacobs. "Your Aunt Carol's here. She's saying she's moving in." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Mr. Jacobs wasn't laughing. "She's got a locksmith and everything." I immediately called Aunt Carol. "What do you think you're doing?" "Oh, sweetie, she could. I'm just making sure everything's alright. You're not using it. And your cousin needs a place to stay while her house is getting fumigated." That didn't sound right. "You can't just break into my house, Aunt Carol. Leave now, or I will call the police." She scoffed. "Go ahead, I'm family. They won't do anything." I wasn't playing games, I called the cops, explaining the situation. Meanwhile, Mr. Jacobs kept an eye out, updating me by the minute. The police arrived and Aunt Carol played her favorite card, the victim. "I'm just worried about his house. It's family duty." But breaking and entering wasn't a family duty. The officer asked her to leave, but she refused. And it escalated quickly. Then came the real shocker. Mr. Jacobs called. "Your aunt's loading stuff into her car. Looks like electronics, maybe cash." My heart sank. She wasn't there to check on the house. She was there to rob me. I didn't hesitate. Press charges. I told the officer on the phone. Aunt Carol was arrested, much to her disbelief. The aftermath was messy. Family members called, some understanding, others berating me for airing dirty laundry. But I stood my ground. Aunt Carol was caught red-handed trying to steal from me. It wasn't just entitlement, it was a crime. The court case was straightforward. Aunt Carol got community service and a hefty fine. And I got an apology. Not that it meant much to me. On my first enlistment in the army, I was a mechanic. In our unit, we had 3 staff sergeants for some reason. Sergeant E was in the last year of his contract and will be retiring. He was assigned as a motor supply sergeant, a position that was made up so he could ride the pine since we were overstaffed. Sergeant G was assigned as a maintenance supervisor and oversaw the preventative maintenance and repair of the vehicles in the motor pool. The third one was our platoon sergeant and doesn't feature in the story. Every Monday, the vehicle operators would come to the motor pool to perform their weekly vehicle inspections. The mechanics would effect any repairs that were possible at the time, like changing out burned bulbs, stuff that was easy and could get the vehicle rolling. Then we would begin performing repairs to any vehicle that had a deadline deficiency, a deficiency that needs to be repaired before the vehicle can be operated. These don't necessarily mean the vehicle isn't operational, just that operating the vehicle in that condition can cause greater problems. Then we'd fix the rest. Usually, on Friday, we'd order any parts that we needed to repair what was left. After the operators left on Monday, the inspection sheets were divided up between the mechanics and we got to work. One week, I had a fairly easy workload and got all of my sheets finished by Wednesday. There was only one vehicle that had a deadline deficiency left, and the rest were ordering parts. The vehicle in question had been taken by the operators every day. I called the unit to let them know that the vehicle had a deadline deficiency and needed to return to the motor pool. They were short on vehicles and long on work and had been stalling. So, I informed my squad leader and left it at that. I went to the office and began ordering parts. When my work was completed, I would assist other mechanics with theirs. Sergeant G walks in and asks why I was in the office and informed him that the rest of my work was complete and I was ordering parts. He asked to see my inspection sheets and started looking through them. I tried to explain about the one vehicle, but he cut me off and said he'd see what the paper said. He saw the deadline deficiency and ordered me out to repair that vehicle immediately. I tried to object and explain the situation, but he cut me off again and ordered me to go out and fix the vehicle. I tried a third time to explain, and again he cuts me off and says, "I don't want your excuses. I want you out on the line fixing that truck. If I see you doing anything else before it's fixed, it'll be Article 15. And Article 15 is non-judicial punishment and can result in reduction of rank or forfeiture of pay. Roger, Sarge. I'm on it. I walked to the rack of manuals for the vehicles, pulled the appropriate one, and found the size of the bolts on a part that needed changed. Grabbed my wrenches and headed out to the assigned spot for the vehicle. I laid down right there, raised my tools, and began making wrenching motions with my arms. I did this for over an hour with some breaks, of course. Those were some giant wrenches. I saw people looking at me and pointing. Eventually someone went to Sergeant T and told him what I was doing, and he came over to check it out. He watches me wrenching for a minute or two, hit cocked. "What are you doing?" "Fixing this truck, Sergeant. It's got a deadline." He was looking at me real funny now, like I had heat stroke or something. "Squirrel, you do realize that the truck ain't here, right?" "Sarge, I know this, and you know this, but Sergeant G doesn't want to hear my excuses. He wants me out on a line fixing this truck." Sergeant D told me to get up and get back to work. I told him that G had threatened an Article 15, and he said he'd take care of it. I took a smoke break to give them time to resolve the issue before I went back to the office. Not sure what Sergeant D said, but G had a scowl on his face when I came back to order my parts. In 1973, my parents had enough money to build a little ranch house in the country. The small bank in town approved the mortgage and the bank signed a contract to give Bob the money to build a house. Bob, as it turns out, was overbooking himself all over town, leaving his clueless minions to do the actual work. The build took longer and longer, with more and more work having to be ripped out and redone. We're not talking about using the wrong color paint or nailing up some wonky trim. The architect forgot to fully erase a line on the blueprint, and the framers built a wall through the bathtub. My mother was told don't put anything heavy in the kitchen cabinets because they were attached to the drywall, not the studs, using a few roofing nails through the back of each cabinet. The garage door opening was framed into the living room instead of towards the driveway, and so on. When the bank's representative showed up for the final inspection, my parents met him in the front yard and refused to sign off on Bob's work. Then the representative became angry as the bank had paid Bob a lot of money. He strode to the front door and pulled on a doorknob, whereupon the entire door, casing included, fell on him. It had simply been wedged, not nailed into place. The bank called Rob, who finally showed up to supervise the work himself. The only problem was that Bob wasn't any better at building a house than his minions were. My parents still refused to sign off on the house. My mother was a stay-at-home mom in an ST rental with 2 tiny children, while my dad was working 2 jobs while this was going on. Throughout the entire process, the bank and Bob treated them very poorly, bullying my mom and lying to my dad. What should have been an exciting time for my parents was ruined. My mom cried a lot and my dad got depressed. Finally, the bank threatened my parents with foreclosure and Bob threatened to sue my parents for breach of contract because the bank refused to pay him any more money. So my exhausted parents went to an attorney and gave him the rundown. Plumbing, electrical, tiling issues, the whole sorry mess. My parents were scared. All they had was their small down payment savings, so if this became a lengthy court battle, the bank and Bob would win. The attorney, Tom, was kind, but my dad said he could tell that he and Mom were doomed from Tom's facial expressions as he sorted through the paperwork. Then abruptly, Tom smiled. "Let's get everyone together for a meeting," he told my parents. "Tomorrow." So my parents, Tom, the bank's representative, the bank's attorney, Bob, and Bob's attorney met at the bank. Tom didn't give anyone else time to begin. He said, "Well, my clients have decided that they no longer want this house. Please, remove it." Everyone else starts laughing. "Remove it? Have you lost your mind?" Tom, in a sweeping theatrical gesture, placed a deed on a table. "My clients own the land the house is sitting on outright. They no longer want the house. Get the house off my client's land." Bob's attorney stared at the deed, and then turned and stared at Bob. "You built a house on land you don't own?" Bob nodded. The bank's attorney started yelling at the bank's representative. "You didn't finance the land the house is on? The representative stammered. No. Tom said firmly, "As I said, gentlemen, you're trespassing on my client's land. I expect the house to be removed and the land returned to its original state at once." My dad said he remembered the blank looks everyone on the other side of the table passed to one another for his whole life. Sure, the bank could foreclose on a house that wouldn't exist by the end of the week. There's no way to recoup the money. They didn't even own the land it was on. Bob was at the 50% he paid out of pocket, plus he was on the hook for tearing down the house and removing it. On top of that, the bank would undoubtedly want him to repay the initial 50% they had given him. Could they have gone after my parents? Sure. A foreclosure would have meant back credit for my parents moving forward. They might lose their down payment, but to sign off on a house in its condition at the time would have meant thousands and thousands of dollars in cash to replace/repair everything from the roof to the basement before the house could be safely lived in. The bank knew my parents didn't have that kind of money, and they are the ones who approved the mortgage. Suddenly, my parents were good people. It was all such a misunderstanding, and the bank and Bob couldn't do enough for them. The house was brought in line with the original blueprints and specifications immediately, at no extra cost to my parents, but at considerable cost to Bob. My parents signed a mortgage, Bob got the rest of his money, and just about broke even on the build. The bank's representative was fired, and Tom, attorney extraordinaire, got a stinging tale of triumph to recall to fellow attorneys for the rest of his life. Before you question this tale, please remember that 1973 was 50 years ago. Banks did things differently back then. Smaller, rural banks in particular were not run the same way the bigger city banks were. There were far fewer federal regulations, and in a smaller community, people didn't always follow them. Anyway, I'm pretty sure they don't always follow them now. Yes, they built a wall through the bathtub. No, I am not making that up. I even left out how a plumber left his lunch bag on a partially built kitchen cabinet, but the cabinet maker didn't feel it was his job to move the bag, so he left it there and built the rest of the cabinet around it. I don't know where Bob found these people, but they were gems. Every single one of them. My daughter Leah's mother and I were never married, but we did officially separate when she was 5. I got with my wife Nia when Leah was 9 and married her when Leah was 12. Leah never got on with Nia, didn't want to spend time with her and was just generally unpleasant to her. We are currently in family therapy, and honestly I think Leah just says the meanest thing possible to avoid actually discussing her feelings with us. She's absolutely amazing to hang around with one-on-one, but is unpleasant around Nia. We were all supposed to spend Christmas together as per our custody agreement. Leah is just 16 now and we have been more lenient, but we have always adhered to our agreement for holidays and birthdays. On Christmas Eve, Leah left to see her boyfriend's family and drop off her gifts. At around 6, I call her and ask when she's heading home, and she says she's staying. I know her mom lives near her boyfriend and asked if that's where she was going, and she didn't answer. I told her to come home and she pretty much agreed, but then never did. I did call her boyfriend's parents and they confirmed she left to her mother's, and I called her mother, who said Leah was there. Nia was heartbroken because she felt like Leah didn't want to be there because of her. This year Nia handled all the gifts. She did the work of going in store and picking them up/picking them out. I decided my daughter wasn't allowed to crap on Nia's efforts to at least be civil with her. So when Leah got home and I asked why she wasn't at Christmas, she said she wanted to spend it with her real mom. I said that's fine. When she asked about her gifts, I said her fake mom got it for her, so she didn't need them. Needless to say, she's pissed at me and hasn't said anything. Nia appreciates me putting my foot down, but feels like Leah is a lost cause and to just give her the gifts. Leah's mom agrees she needs to stop treating Nia badly and expecting no consequences. Am I the jerk? Note, she has the gifts her mom and boyfriend and other family got her, just not the ones Nia helped with. I got a car for Christmas, gifted it to her in November because she needed the car. Leah is an only child on both sides. I have no other children and don't plan to. I am fine with having a relationship with Leah outside of Nia. My issue is that she treats Nia badly like a subhuman. She acts outright nasty to her. I wouldn't push so hard if she could at least be civil. And now some comments on the post. Someone saying, I think you need to be making a distinction between her being rude and her not liking Nia. If she's actually being rude to her, then I think it's fine to punish her for it in an appropriate manner. And I hope you have been doing that consistently. But trying to force a relationship and punishing her for not feeling the way you want her to is just unfair. And you're probably making it worse. Wanting to spend Christmas with her mother doesn't sound like being rude or uncivil. Tipping on you at the last minute isn't really okay. But let me ask you this. If she had just come out and said that she wanted to spend Christmas with her mother, was there any chance you would have said yes, or not get upset with her? From your posts and comments, I get the impression that you would have forbidden it, and at minimum lectured her about accepting Nia. So I think her using the opportunity of seeing her boyfriend to avoid spending Christmas with you is actually quite rational behavior for a teenager. I think if you want a relationship with your daughter once she's an adult, and this isn't far away, you need to accept that she doesn't like Nia and stop pushing her to do so. Like I said, rudeness and incivility is another story. And she's still a child. Punishment for that is fine. And when she's an adult, setting boundaries regarding acceptable behavior will also be fine. But if she wants to be at her mother's on Christmas, for example, you have to let it go. I don't know that she'll ever like Nia, but I suspect that things will get a lot better civility-wise if you stop with insisting that she likes her. Another commenter adds, you're not the jerk based on what you said about both you and her mother agree her behavior toward her is not acceptable. She wouldn't expect gifts from someone she treats wrong. You should sit down outside of therapy and ask her what the real issue is. Has she ever said or did anything to her? And is she holding on to the idea of her bio parents getting back together? You don't need to wait for her to share. You need to ask and establish boundaries. Understand her feelings, but disrespect will not be tolerated. A third commenter goes with, no, not the jerk. I feel bad for your wife. It sounds like she's tried for a long time now only to continually get shat on. Your daughter is fully accountable now, and if she wants to be an arse to your wife and then expect all the gifts, she should be in for a shock. I think it irks me more because I'm a child that was caught in a divorce. My dad married my stepmom around the same age, and my stepmom has made it her mission in life to delete my sister and I from our dad's life. Despite that, I still try and keep up a relationship. Your daughter has a polar opposite, and she's being awful. I will perhaps inquire as to what your ex-wife has said about you and a situation that led to them splitting up. It might be that you've been solely blamed the entire time without you realizing it.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.